This show is produced by the Harwood Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris, and we love making this show available to you free of charge. If you'd like to help us keep it that way, make a contribution to our Karma Jar. For more information, go to our website. Today I'm baking a batch of these delicious chocolate chip swirl cupcakes. Now if you want to follow along with me, just take your smartphone and scan the QR code here on the screen and it'll take you right to the recipe on my homepage. That way if you want to bake them together, we can. Now the idea for this recipe came from one of my VFFs on Facebook, Tasneen, and she was saying she had seen some piping done where they had done two frostings and it kind of swirled as you piped it, and could I show that? Well, this is a really fun cupcake, not only for the swirled frosting, but I've also swirled the cake part so it's a vanilla chocolate swirl on the bottom. I'm going to start by getting a 12-cup muffin tin out. I'm going to put paper liner in each of the wells, and then I'm going to take a little bit of baking spray. I'm going to spritz the top. Now this does a couple of things. One, if the cupcake batter bakes up over the top, it won't stick to the pan. But the other thing I found is that having that little bit of spray inside the baking cup, it helps it peel off of the cake. So many times when you peel a paper liner off, it seems like it takes so much of the cake. Well, with this little spritz, it tends to come off with a lot less cake attached. I'll set this aside and we'll get our batters ready. Now because I wanted these cupcakes to be swirled, I wanted to make sure that I had a batter that I made sort of a master batter and that I could divide in half and flavor one with chocolate and leave the other one just vanilla. So that's what we're going to do now. And to get started, I've got a half a cup of butter that I've taken out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to cut it into some little pieces like this. Now I'm going to put this in my standing mixer. If you don't have a standing mixer, you can certainly use just a hand mixer. That'll be fine. I'm going to let this cream for about a minute. You can see it's gotten nice and fluffy, and to that I'll add 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and I'll let that cream for another minute. Now it's time to add our eggs. For this recipe, I'm going to be using 1 whole egg and 2 egg yolks. Now, just as a little tip, when you separate your eggs, you're going to have 2 egg whites left over. Just put a piece of plastic over those and put them in the refrigerator. And if you want to make your friends and family really happy, whip up a batch of my coconut macaroons from the cookie jar, because that recipe takes exactly 2 egg whites. So for this, I'm going to put my 2 egg yolks and my 1 egg in, and along with the eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I'm going to let this mix just until I see that the egg and the vanilla has mixed through. I'm going to turn my mixer off and let this butter mixture just sit here for a second while I get the dry ingredients ready. So in a small bowl, I have 1½ cups of flour, 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I've got my little whisk, and I'm going to whisk those ingredients together. It's important that that leavening, which is the baking powder, gets mixed all through the flour. And I've also measured out 1/2 cup of milk. Now today I'm using a whole milk because I want an added richness to this cake batter. Now we're going to start putting in our flour and our milk, but we do it alternating. So I'm going to turn my mixer on a slow speed. And I take my flour, I'm going to put about 1/3 of it in. And while it's still running, I'll take and put 1/2 of my milk in, another 1/3 of the flour, the rest of the milk, then the rest of the flour. And then I'm just going to let this spin Looks great, so I'll stop. Now this is our master cake batter here. So I want to divide it in half. So I'm going to spoon half of the batter out into my bowl that I used with the flour. This is going to be my vanilla batter, and to that I have a half a cup of mini chocolate chips that I'm going to pour in, and I'm going to mix with my spatula. I'm going to set this aside, and this is going to be my chocolate batter, and to give it that really great chocolate flavor, I'm going to be using some chocolate syrup, and this is just a Hershey's chocolate syrup. I'm going to measure out 1/4 of a cup and pour that in. With my spatula, I want to mix this in really, really well. We're going to start with our chocolate cake batter. I'm using my little cookie scoop, but what I want to do is divide all of that chocolate batter into my 12 wells. Now I've used up all of my batter, and the wells are full about 1/3 of the way. So now I'm going to put on the vanilla chocolate chip layer. I'm going to take my cookie scoop and again divide it up, putting it right on top of the chocolate. Now it's time to swirl. So I'm just using one of my dinner knives. It's not sharp on the end. With my knife, I'm just going to bring a little bit of that chocolate batter on top of the white and kind of swirl it just a little bit. You don't want to work this too much because you don't want to mix it all together. As you can see here, it just gives a little bit of movement. You can see the chocolate and the vanilla just kind of swirled together. Now I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Now we're going to let this bake for about 17 to 18 minutes, but you will want to check it with a toothpick to make sure it comes out clean. Now if you've gone through a melted chocolate chip, you may get a little chocolate, but you'll notice there's no creamy part on here. Now I'm going to let these sit here for about 5 minutes. Now once the cakes have set just a little bit, I'm going to take a fork and pop them out and set them on a cooling rack. Now you can see how nicely these have swirled together. Now they need to cool completely, so I'm going to let them sit on the rack for about an hour. And then we're going to make our frosting. Now for this, we're going to make a vanilla frosting and then a chocolate frosting. So for the vanilla, I'm going to start by getting a half a cup of butter out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise twice and then run my knife through it. Now I'm going to be using my standing mixer with the whisk attachment, but you could certainly use a hand mixer. And we'll let this cream up until it's nice and fluffy. And then I'm going to add 2 cups of powdered sugar. Now I found with using my whisk attachment, I don't need to sift the powdered sugar, but if you find that you do, go right ahead, but measure out the 2 cups first, and we'll put that into our bowl. We'll start that creaming. And while that's mixing together, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of milk and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. Now I'm going to be using a clear vanilla today because I want this icing to come out totally white. Otherwise, if I use a regular vanilla, it will have sort of an off-white color, which is fine. The flavor will be still great. But I am going to use this clear vanilla, so look for that in your cake decorating section of your craft store. Now that everything's mixed in, I'm going to turn the speed up and let this mix for about 4 minutes. Halfway through, you're going to want to give it a scrape down on the bowl, making sure that all the powdered sugar is mixed in, and then we'll let that beat for the rest of the 4 minutes. And you can see this gets really light and really fluffy. It'll be great to pipe with. Now I will have to rinse off my beater because I'm going to use the same whisk to beat up my fudge frosting. But I'm going to let this just sit in this bowl because I have a second stainless bowl that I can use. Now for the chocolate fudge frosting, we're going to use 2 kinds of chocolate. I have 2 ounces of bittersweet or unsweetened chocolate that I have in a bowl. And to that, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of semi-sweet chocolate. Now I'm going to put this in the microwave on 30-second bursts, making sure to stir in between each cooking period because I want this to get nice nice and melted. Now that this is nice and smooth, it's time to let it get to room temperature. So I'm just going to set this aside for about 5 minutes while I get my butter creaming. Now I have a fresh bowl, clean beaters, and I have 2/3 of a cup of butter that I've taken out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise twice, and then I'll cut it into cubes and put that into my bowl. And I'm going to put this on a medium speed for about 2 minutes until the butter is nice and fluffy. And I'm going to turn this speed down to low. And I've measured out 1 1/3 cups of powdered sugar, and I'm going to sprinkle that in. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I'm just using my regular dark vanilla in this one. And I'll turn the speed up. And I'll let that cream until it all comes together. Now once that I see that the butter and the sugar is pretty well come together, I'm going to give this a scrape down, because in this bowl with this whisk attachment, sometimes some of the powdered sugar gets stuck on the bottom. I'm going to let that kind of come together for a few seconds, and then I'm going to take my chocolate, and this is at room temperature now, and I'm going to put that right in. And now I'm going to put this on a medium speed until it's nice and fluffy. Now if you find that you need to, take your spatula and scrape down the sides. Especially with the chocolate, we don't want to see any of the butter or the powdered sugar. And after a couple of minutes, it's going to look like this. Again, nice and smooth, nice and fluffy. Now we're going to get started piping. Now normally I would use a large piping bag, but today I'm going to be using 2 smaller ones because I want to show you 2 different styles of piping these cupcakes. Now if you're not familiar with basic cake decorating skills, you should check out my cooking school video. I have one on Cake Decorating 101. It's only 99 cents and it's at our website, and you should check that out because that will show you a lot of the basic techniques that I use for cake decorating. Now for these swirl cupcakes, there's a couple of ways you can go. You can go with a large open star or just with a large round tip. I want to show you both today. Now to fill our bags, we're going to put half of the bag full of chocolate frosting and half of the bag full of vanilla. And as I spoon it in, I'm just going to put it on half of the bag, on the bottom part of the bag. And then I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to spoon the vanilla on the bottom side of the bag. So as you can see, the bag, half vanilla, half chocolate. This is with my round tip. I'm going to squeeze it down, and then I'm going to pipe on top of it. And you can see we get that great swirl. Now with the open star tip, you get more of a textured look like this. So whether you go with the round tip or the open star, these swirled cupcakes look just delicious. I'm going to take one of the cupcakes and I'm going to open it up for you. See how little cake comes off that liner? That's because we put that little bit of spray in. That's really nice. And I'm going to cut this in half. And you can see the swirl inside and then the swirl with the frosting. The frosting is really, really creamy. I love in the cake those little mini chocolate chips. That's a nice surprise. And then with the frosting, you have a pocket of vanilla and a pocket of chocolate. It's really a nice cupcake. If you'd like to try these chocolate chip swirl cupcakes at home, just go to our website and go to the Cupcake show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. If you do make them, don't forget to send me a photo so I can send you the cupcake badge. Make sure to join us on Facebook. We have a wonderful community of people, and also that's where I vlog. And as always, if you have any ideas or questions for me, please send me an email. I'll see you next time.